Okay, so we're on pride. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux said, "Only pride rises up against all the virtues, and it is like a universal and lethal disease, and it corrupts all of them." So again, it's not. There's always, as you could do something very, very good. Very virtuous, but it is ruined by pride, as if you do it for a prideful reason. It is ruined by pride. It loses all the merit. See, to give alms in a very, very ostentatious way, for example, it ruins everything. See, even though the act is good, it gets into everything. It's like a poison that gets into everything. And so therefore people can be ostentatious about their virtue. It's very common. Pride engenders, above all, curiosity. A curiosity can be a good curiosity, for example, to be curious about theological things and wanting to do research to find out about things that are important to know. That's good. But then there's an evil curiosity, and that is to try to know things or have an appetite to know things that really don't pertain to you or which are stupid and useless. Okay. That just so the typical person who is interested in all of the gossip, and what are people saying, and et cetera. So that's just sinful curiosity. Boasting, to talk about yourself, to declare all of your accomplishments in front of everybody. I'm sure you've known people like that. To show off, to some people that can only talk about themselves, talking about all of their past life, all of the incidents that happened to them, and this, that, and the other thing. That's all a form of boasting. So you should learn to control your tongue and just say things that are useful and necessary. And that doesn't mean you have to be like a mummy or a piece of stone. I mean, you can say funny things and whatnot, but you shouldn't be constantly yakking, talking. You should have a lot of control over your tongue, particularly when you're a priest. So you don't want to be. You want to be somebody who is a bit solemn in the sense that, and very, very dignified, and where you don't descend into petty things. Hypocrisy, that is to say one thing and do the opposite or do another. You see, so to that sort of show off virtue when really underneath there's no virtue. It's hypocrisy. So you do. You show off, you eat just one bean for lunch, just have a bean, and then when nobody's looking, you're in this kitchen, eating like crazy. You see, that would be hypocrisy. All right. Quarrels. People get into quarrels because of pride. Sometimes you have to, there are legitimate disagreements, but quarreling is disagreement for no good reason, just being stubborn or nasty or something like that. It's very common with pride. Stubbornness is a very, very common sign of pride, to be excessively attached to your own will. And very, very common sin, excessively attached to your own will. So you can't be moved to do anything that you don't agree with, and so you have your own mind about everything. So humility wants to just, as much as possible, go along, whatever the program is, you follow. as long as it's not against the law of God and it is not in some way grossly imprudent or something like that. But from the day-to-day activities to just not insist on your own will. So that's humility. But stubbornness is to insist on your own will in things that are minor and always you must have it your way. So that's a very strong sign of pride. Discord, where this pride, this enmity and factions, and that's from pride. And hatred. See, so where if somebody is opposed to your agenda, then they are the object of your hate. St. John Chrysostom said, pride blinds the understanding of the mind, and there is no evil which is equal to pride. It makes a devil out of man, and an insulter, a blasphemer, and a perjurer. That's what pride does to a human being. St. Gregory the Great said, pride prevents us from judging with impartiality. So it causes a prejudice for one thing or another. We can't step back and look at things in an objective way because of pride. It makes us, he continues, it makes us talk loud. Some people do that. And it's important that you know these things, so for the spiritual life, your own spiritual lives, but also that when you are directing other people, you can advise them as seeing signs, just like a doctor would see signs of certain diseases. As you can see signs in other people of things that need to be corrected. So you when somebody's confessing to you or somebody is explaining something to you, just talking to you, you can sense certain faults which need to be corrected. Sometimes in marriage cases, where my husband is a devil and I hope he dies, and where you can pick up things, have a certain sensitivity to what vices are active and what virtues are active too. So it's important in this. As I said, your ascetical and mystical theology you will use at least as much as your moral theology, far more than your dogmatic theology. Your ascetical and mystical theology you will call upon a great deal. And it's the easiest of them. There's no processions of the Trinity in ascetical theology. Or the circumcisions of the persons. That's always one I always thought. And after you're done with the various processions and all of the things, then you get to the circumcisions of the persons of the Trinity. Oh my goodness. So I haven't taught that course in a long, long time. So he says, St. Gregory the Great says, the mind of the prideful is always, so he talks loud. Pride inspires rage in sadness. It cannot bear any kind of adversity. It inspires impudent acts, a haughty manner of walking, even, he says. And that is true. Some people you can tell. And bitterness in our responses. So a sharp tongue, we'll see that a little later too. A sharp tongue is a sign of pride. It is not wrong to criticize people who need to be criticized and to criticize them even severely. Look at our blessed Lord, how he was toward the Pharisees. There was no one more humble and no one kinder and more charitable. I mean, you see it in all of his dealings with people until he got to the Pharisees. And he blasted them. There's the famous woes. You have the 8 Beatitudes, and then there's the 8 woes. Woe to you, whitened sepulchres, etc., etc. So he blasted them. And some people at times need to be blasted. There is legitimate criticism of people, but it's something that is in general unusual and exceptional. But if you have the habit of a sharp tongue, saying nasty things about people here, there, and the other place, and making comments about their petty faults, that's a sign of pride. You should not have a sharp tongue. And when you control your tongue that way, and when you say criticize what somebody's thinking or their positions, you should do so in a very, very calm and objective way. That is far more convincing than to pepper it with all kinds of sarcasm and nastiness, because you are far more believable if you are totally objective in your criticism of what other people think or their positions, etc. And you should always presume somebody's good conscience and goodwill. Presume it, and not blast them with all kinds of nastiness, etc. It doesn't do any good at all. And also it ruins your credibility, because there's so much rancor in it that people don't take you seriously. It's like somebody who loses his temper and starts screaming at people. He has lost all of his credibility. Nobody listens to him. They just run away. There's nothing in it. But if somebody applies discipline or criticism or correction with calmness and decorum, you might say, it becomes very credible and is received much better. So that's something you should know as priests. You see, it's because you will have occasion to counsel people and to correct people, and you should always do that in a suitable way. All right. He says, still St. Gregory, the mind of the prideful is always prepared to inflict an insult. It is, he says, it's feeble in regard to toleration. It is not prepared to tolerate any kind of evil or problem or weakness in other people. It is very intolerant, where tolerance is prudent. Tolerance is not always prudent, but where tolerance is prudent, it should be, of course, observed. But pride tends to make you, in principle, intolerant. See, sometimes people's faults have to be tolerated. It happens a lot. When you're in a community, you have to tolerate other people's faults as they have to tolerate your faults. That's community life. I mean, if you say, I can't bear to be with this person, that you're going to cause a lot of trouble. I mean, you will have to live with other priests, and sometimes you get along, or there's certain preferences that you might have, certain preferences that you don't have. In other words, says everyone's character is different, and sometimes people's character can grate on you and has nothing to do with their virtue or their vices. There's certain saints that who didn't get along. I think Saint Ignatius did not get along with Saint Philip Neri, if I'm not mistaken, and Saint Epiphanius couldn't stand St. John Chrysostom. There have been saints who had some difficulties together, and that's just character, what we call character. They could both be saints, but character doesn't always get along well. So there's many things you have to tolerate, and nobody's perfect, and people have faults, and you have to bear up with those things, unless there's some grave fault that needs to be corrected. But then you should go to the superior. You shouldn't be fighting with one another. But all communities must operate on the principle of charity and not on the principle of personal preference. Supernatural charity must be the guide in all communities of priests, nuns, etc. If it isn't, it will fall apart. So bearing up with someone who's unpleasant to you is actually a mortification. And you should take it that way. And remember Saint Teresa of Child Jesus would pick out somebody that she didn't like the most in order to walk with her, as a mortification, as a way of exercising charity, to act supernaturally rather than naturally. That's the key. Everything supernaturally, supernatural virtue, not natural virtue or natural likes or dislikes. He says, this is still St. Gregory, pride makes us lazy in regard to obedience. See, so we're hesitant and we drag our feet. Obedience, if it's perfect, should be immediate. He says it's offensive in attacking others. So again, the sharp tongue and that willingness to blast other people. He says it's slow to do what, this prideful person is slow to do what he ought to do. And that happens many times during the day. What you ought to do are your duties of state and life. And that is the way you pray always. You see, St. Paul says to pray always. And you do that by means of offering up your duties of state and life, your obedience to God ultimately. So always be conscious of your duties of state and life. What should I be doing now? Should I be studying? Should I be praying? Should I be sleeping? Should I be recreating? And you have a rule here. That's to train you to, when you're off on your own, to observe duties of state and life. So, because nobody's going to, be constantly ringing a bell as to what you should be doing right now. So you have to learn to be faithful to duties of state and life. That is God's law for you right now, your duties of state and life. Whether they're pleasant or unpleasant, it's God's law for you right now. See, and that's how you offer up your daily sacrifice to God in that way. He says that this prideful man is always prepared to do what he ought not to do. In other words, he's always prepared to disobey the law. And he cannot be dissuaded to do anything which does not please him. See, if it doesn't please him, he won't do it, and that's the stubbornness. So that's St. Gregory the Great. St. Isidore said, whoever sins is a prideful man, because by sinning he shows contempt for the divine precepts. And I said that yesterday, that there is always some pride in every single sin. Even a little sin of gluttony, there's a consciousness, at least implicit consciousness, of disobeying the law of God. I really shouldn't have this extra piece of cake, but it's really good. You see, that's the implicit logic of it. It's not a good idea. I already weigh 400 pounds. And, but there's an implicit logic there, or I should be doing something else, but I feel like taking a nap, or there's always an implicit application of the law and a repudiation of the law. That's the pride. So, he says, pride causes the death of the soul. It is, St. Isidore, it is the greatest of all crimes. Practically all the saints say that. It destroys all the virtues and engenders all the vices. All of the saints say the same thing. It's the mother of all vice, pride. There's not a single vice it is not capable of. That's why there should be a constant battle against pride, against excessive self-love. St. Augustine said, and this is important, pride must be feared even in doing good acts. Because, as I said, you could do something good under the banner of pride. It happens a lot. Pride is a poison which corrupts prayers, confessions, communions, chant, talent, beauty, the mind, the soul, and the heart. It can get into all of those things. For example, a priest could build a church and raise all kinds of money and decorate it beautifully. But then he has to impose upon all of the people to come and see it. You want to see my church? You want to see my church? It is a monument to his pride. It doesn't ruin the objective good of what he does, but he makes a sin out of it. So you have to be careful of that. Clerical pride you'd be surprised, a lot of sin that way. So it can change even good into evil. So intellectual pride. See, I know so much theology that I'm better than anyone else, and I know better, and I've read 100,000 books, and I'm like St. Thomas the theologian. Intellectual pride. So then you start typically thinking things that aren't true because of your intellectual pride. Remember, I always say that the seminary is a success if you graduate from here realizing how much you don't know. That's what we want you to figure out. Just look in this room. This is how much you don't know. Just a small fraction of what you don't know. All right. So you should approach any kind of theological problem with humility, that maybe you have something to learn here. I mean, I can say that myself over the years. I have, you might say, progressed in learning things and realizing things and that I didn't know, say, 30, 40 years ago. Many other things that perhaps I will learn. So you have to have that open-mindedness that you don't know everything. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux said, "There is a pride of the heart, a pride of the mouth, a pride of work, and a pride of dress." So you can be ostentatious in your dress, believe it or not. All right, so it comes out in all sorts of ways. Okay.